And so we have Chris Halsne here today from American University to talk to us about investigative reporting and invite us into what an investigative discussion looks like. You know, for some of us, there's just a term that we hear thrown around, but now is your chance to really to see what sort of tangible skills you need to develop. And Chris, of course, a world-class reporter, and Chris, we're so happy to have you here with us, and thank you for your support for diversity in newsrooms. And go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Russell. I came in here super excited. You probably don't know, I don't think I told you, but when you just talk about healthcare, you just came away from that topic. My daughter works for the VA hospital system in Seattle and is one of the lead researchers on robotics and prosthetics for veterans. And my other daughter just retired as a captain out of the Army and is married to another captain. And so, you know, I have a family that is supportive of military, and until Russell reached out, I never thought, well, should there be some organizations like this that take the skill sets from those who've been in the military and want to go into the regular working world? You know, what skills do they have to bring to journalism? And as a professor here at American University, I started thinking a lot, and I'm thrilled to try to bridge some of those gaps. Last semester, I had two graduate students who both came in after military careers, and both of them said, "Hey, professor, I don't know that much about journalism or writing or style, but I can work hard and know a lot about the world." And I will tell you, they did absolutely fantastic in the program because a lot of students don't have the broader sense in journalism of what the world is about. So they did really terrific. I want to talk today specifically about public records. As an investigative reporter, I think it's the bread and butter. It's the secret sauce that creates a lot of careers and exclusive stories within newsrooms. And I'm a bit of a geek about it, so I need to like truncate it into this session. But I mean, I have friends who collect like model trains, and I have a friend who stands in Target parking lot at 7 in the morning, waiting for them to open so we can go in and get the latest Hot Wheels and try to find the best picks for those. I collect public records. I love the art of trying to find out what government agencies know and to be able to use those records to either prove or disprove different various elements of newsworthy items that affect my community. So I'm going to do a short PowerPoint on the very basics of public records. And for those of you who have maybe been in the business a while, I'm trying to tailor some of this to give you a few nuggets that maybe even you don't know, even if you filed some records requests before. And for others who are just beginning, to make sure that you get a base for what I'm talking about. I think when I go to PowerPoint, basically it's harder to see folks on the screen and such, but I'll try to keep an eye on the chat box, and depending on the hosting abilities here, I'm sure that you can get my attention. Stop me anytime when you have a question. Okay.
Sounds good, Chris. Go for it.
Do you want to add me as a co-host so that I can screen share?
Oh, I didn't realize you weren't. Okay, sorry. Hang on. Let me see here. Change role. I think that you should have. Okay, let's see. Screen sharing all panelists. That's what I need to do. Okay, you want to try now? Are you able to?
Yep, it looks like I can.
Did you say it looks like you can or you cannot?
Yeah, it looks like I'll be able to share.
Okay.
So the question is, okay,
Looks good over here.
all right, we have some public records. All right, this is the best definition that I can get of a public record. And there are some elements here that I really like. Public records are basically anything that the government holds, right? That taxpayers pay government to do certain things for them. And the government keeps track of all of those things. You don't have to be a journalist to know that they keep these things, but they keep almost everything. And if they're a public servant and if they're using tax money to collect or keep records, then those are things that you can have. That's basically a public record. And you can get them in almost any way that they keep them. If they keep paper, great. You'll have a paper file. If they have an electronic database, then you can have an electronic database. If they have pictures, video, audio, those are things you can ask for. So this is a really good definition of a very broad public record. The only things you can't have is in those specific statutory exemptions where state law says you can't. We could talk about what some of those are. But hold on, are you not seeing the whole screen?
Yeah, sorry, Chris. We're seeing public records, but it's your you haven't opened up the file, or maybe you're not sharing. Maybe you're only sharing that panel. You're not sharing the. There you go. Now we're looking at it.
Now it's no change to me. You're looking at that this time.
That's right. Yeah. Now we see. Yeah. Because your screen share it was sharing the wrong tab. It was just sharing the folder that it was in instead of the document. Now we're good.
Fantastic. And I do have a screen, your screen sharing chat over the top of all of this. Let's see if I can get it off. I can't. It doesn't matter. I could go through it anyway. So that's the definition of a public record. Some of the examples that I can give for public records that journalists use every day are, police reports. That's a really typical one. They're tricky sometimes because ongoing investigations that might screw up a case is one of those exemptions, often when you're asking for records about how the police are conducting business or what they're doing on a specific investigation. That's an exemption that they might use. But typically, calls to service, traffic tickets, crimes, criminal affidavit reports, mugshots, 911 calls. In most states, those are tools in which all journalists, especially investigative journalists, utilize mostly on a daily basis. When it comes to, court records, those are even more available than police records because the courts deal with that next level. The police are just investigating. Maybe somebody's accused of something, all the records for accused. But once it gets to court and they file records against somebody, it's at that next level of things that you can see. Budgets or government spending is a big one to get your hands on. How the government spends money affects a very broad segment of your audience. It is a way to expand almost every story that you can think of into an investigative realm, or broadening the viewership and the readership realm, is to talk about how the government spends the money. And sometimes they're spending it perfectly wisely, and sometimes they're not. But budgets and government spending are widely available to reporters and the public. Public can get this stuff too, but they just normally don't. And finally, this is more of a heart of investigative reporting, an inspection of anything. I mean, inspections tell you two things. They tell you how a business that is regulated or an industry that's regulated, how safely they are operating according to the rules that are set out for them to safely operate under. It also, inspection records also show how the inspectors or the government agency does during those inspections. For example, if they're supposed to do elevator inspections for safety once a year, and that's the law, and you take a look and the agency doesn't do it except every 3 years, well, you have some questions about understaffing and why they aren't following the law and whether elevators are as safe as they can be. So it isn't just the inspection. It can also showcase the inspection project as a whole. I always tell journalists, please do 2 things before you actually file the request itself. Check online, see if the agency's already posted the records. More and more agencies are starting to do that, not because they want to be more transparent, as it turns out, which I wish was the case. But instead they're doing it because reporters repeatedly ask for certain records, and it's easier to go ahead and publish them and make them available on the website than have journalists, 10 journalists call every week asking for those particular records. Whenever I go looking, though, to see if something is already there before I actually file the records request, I'm always looking on the website of the government agency or agencies that I think keep those records. And I'm always typing in things like data, forms, reports, records, sets. I use those words in their database or in their website to see if I could find if they have some kind of database or set of records already there. The Google spiders that go out aren't really great at finding internal documents on government websites. And so often when I Google something, it is, it just doesn't show up. But it does when I go to the website and check with some of these keywords. That's number one, see if it's already there. In this case, in DC, these P cards, the only reason that's all the credit card information for city workers. There have been investigations in the past, reporters asking to see how money is spent on those credit cards. Some of it had to do with like football games. And so the government, instead of reporters asking every month for the Visa credit statement, they just decided to put them up on the website. That's a good example of reporters bugging a government agency enough for something that they proactively put it up. Number 2, before you actually file the request, call and email the public information officer, the media affairs contact for the government agency. Just ask. The reason we're asking and checking beforehand is public records requests, depending on the agency, whether it's federal, and depending on what state you're in, can take anywhere from 5 to 35 or 40 days before someone looks at the record request and tries to fulfill it. There are some federal agencies that might take, I had an FBI request one time be fulfilled 6 years later. And it was kind of ridiculous. I had moved on to obviously other stories, but that's how long it took them to get around to it. So if you can find it online or ask for somebody to help you get it without filing the request, it can save you time, and time is money in journalism, that's for sure. Ask them if they can provide the materials without a formal request. Hey, medical examiner's office, I know that every year you put out a statistical sheet of how everybody died. I want to get the latest COVID numbers. I know by your cycle, it'll be next March before you put out this year's numbers, but you must keep month by month, right? To be able to make that report. Can you get me that month by month for the first 6 months? I have the reports from last year. I can do the month by month comparison there. Most of the time you won't have to file the paperwork. They're glad to go find that record for you. You can also, while you have somebody on the phone, find out if the agency keeps the records in a certain way. Do you keep electronic records? Do you only keep paper records? Can you hand me PDFs? Do I have to drive down there with $5 in my pocket and have you copy something for me? Can you put it on a jump stick and send it to me in the mail? The way in which they keep records is important to you to try to expedite time. They're all different ways. And I always ask if any other person or reporters asked for similar records in the past or the same records. In the state of Virginia, for example, they have to respond within 5 days. In DC, it's 15. In Maryland, it's 30 business days. If I ask somebody, hey, has this already been requested? They can jump in their computer, they can find out, yes, a month ago, so-and-so asked for it. You shouldn't have to wait for it then. It's already been collected. Nobody has to do research. The records are already there because they've already put them together. And often that means they're also free. I want to share a story with you here that was put together, I put together, our team put together in Denver at Fox regarding public records. And as an investigative reporter, let me broaden this out a little bit. Often our units that I've run both in Seattle and Denver operate independently a bit from the newsroom. We're not in that daily mix all the time, but we're always looking for ways to use what's news that's important to the community and look at these things a different way, in an investigative way. I always say, think investigative. You have a story that's breaking, the station or stations and the newspapers and the websites in town are covering it really well. But it's an event or a series of events that have happened around perhaps breaking news or some big thing. And investigative reporters just get to step back a little bit and think, were there some warning signs to prevent whatever happened? Could some regulation or an inspection or a better monitoring of a person or the fix of a system, perhaps a parole system, could have prevented this? You can look at those stories and start figuring out ways in which public records can start telling you the history of those stories. Let me do a couple things here. Let me take a look at the chat real quick. I got a question first. Do you always contact the public information officer first? Every word that authorities will silence sources if you contact them. Really great question. Every piece of journalism that you do, don't forget that records are great. Data is terrific. It's black and white, right? It saves you from a lot of legal problems. But investigative reporting, all reporting, is about sources, and it's about personal contacts. It's about building trust with people that you feel can help you with your story. Public information officers are people that you learn in your community really quickly about who is honest and wants to give you records and help you with your story and understands if you're asking hard questions, and those reflect perhaps poorly on an agency, that you're just doing your job. They're going to do their job, you're going to do yours. As you make these contacts, you may run into some who, by the creation normally of the highest hierarchy, the boss in whatever agency, sometimes a politician, sometimes somebody put there by other purposes, that they are obstructionists. And if in your reporting process you know that they're obstructionists, then you have a right to be worried that they may silence sources if you contact the public information officer. However, we're going to strictly talk about public records, black and white. They are required by law to give you most things. There are some exceptions, and I hate it when a law says they may give you the record instead of they shall give you the record. I like the word shall. But whether or not they're going to try to silence other people from talking is a bit irrelevant if your story is in that public record. If the budget number nobody else has reported and you're going to get that and report on that, you can always find multiple sources. Rarely is there a single or such a small group of sources that it would be more important to keep quiet or work secretly on that record than to get the record itself to nail down your story. So it's a really great question. I should show you my screensaver. You know, it says trust no one. I don't trust anybody. And I think that's okay as an investigative reporter. It doesn't make me cynical, it just makes me cautious that people lie to me a lot. And I try to build relationships in a very professional way with those that I'm in contact with who are the kind of the gatekeeper of agencies. And it doesn't take you very long to use common sense to say, that person isn't going to help. They're going to try to screw up the story. They're going to try to make sure that I don't get to the final conclusion one way or the other, and which ones will. And so, yes, being wary is fine, but I would say that the records are normally worth making that call and letting the public information officer know. I know that my investigative reporter colleagues, they debate this all the time. At what point in an investigation do you know you have the story? At what point does the research and the concept and the collection become, you know, you have it? When you know you have it, it is time to reach out to those who are affected by the story, even if you think that's going to screw things up and make people stop talking. Because if the focus of the investigation, for example, is, I don't know, Department of Motor Vehicles, to work an investigation for a month and you know what the story is going to be, and at the very last minute to tell DMV that you have this story and you're going to go on TV with it, isn't overly fair. And so out of an ethics standpoint and out of a fairness standpoint, you need to bring the players that are going to be in your story, whether you think they're going to screw it up or not, whether you think that they're going to obfuscate records or not talk or run or try to get other people to lie. You need to bring them into the process. You need to give them time to respond, to understand the ramifications of a potential story, and quite frankly, sometimes make sure that your facts are correct. There are often times where investigative reporters work on complicated material. Your data that you collect on something may look one way, and there might be a reasonable explanation why it's wrong. And only the subject of the investigation who you think screwed something up could give you that information. It might be very valuable. When they don't talk, it's a whole different story, but you want to give them as much rope and chain as possible to tell their story, okay? I'm going to drop a YouTube link into the chat. You can watch it there. I'm also going to play it here. Sometimes Zoom plays these things just fine, and sometimes it's irritating and you might want to watch it a different way. So, I mean, the story is about 5 minutes long, and it's based on a lot of investigative work and looking at a topic that was happening in our community a new way. And so I'll play it, and you could do either or. The setup here is on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, police were trying to help a mentally ill man based on his roommate calling saying that he was problematic. The police went in, and the person inside the house opened fire. And that had been the second time in a very short amount of time where officers had been killed in the Denver area. And both times they were, they had ballistic material on, ballistic vests, ballistic shields. And we started wondering after this series of events about how police departments funded their safety equipment. We ended up doing a 5-part investigative series into this potential problem about not being ready for rifle rounds at police departments with body gear. But I wanted to show you this because when you collect data and read hundreds of reports and start crunching numbers, news directors, especially in TV, start going, oh, this is going to be boring, really boring. But there are ways to use this data for the base of a story that's still highly visual.
Police killed while wrapped up in their protective vests.
They did not have the ability to withstand that type of firearm.
Shots fired, shots fired. Medical, come up to the drive.
Can more lives be saved by understanding when body armor protects and when it can't? Starting tonight, our team of Fox 31 problem solvers expose deadly trends, grabbing the attention of the Justice Department and local law enforcement alike.
And we want to give you a warning right off the bat. This investigative series contains adult content, material some of our viewers are going to find upsetting.
Yeah, sadly, that happens when the topic involves more than 100 dead police officers, dead even though they wore ballistic safety gear. Investigative reporter Chris Halsne begins our week-long coverage, Bulletproof.
By analyzing every cop killing in America over the past decade, one number stood out: 137. That's how many police officers have been murdered with a gun while wearing body armor. We eliminated those cases where the fatal shot was to the head, neck, and legs. That left us with 63 officers killed in the line of duty in the areas in which these were built to defend.
Officer down, officer down.
Bullet holes and shell casings only begin to tell the horror story of what happened at this Park County home.
I've been hit.
Facing eviction, Martin Worth opened fire with a .45 caliber rifle on 3 Park County deputies, killing Corporal Nate Kerrigan. He died from one shot through a narrow opening in the armhole of his vest. One of 38 dead police officers we identified over 10 years, killed by a shot that slipped through what's called the Achilles heel of body armor.
Sheriff's Office!
Douglas County Deputy Jeff Pelley, seen here in this dramatic body camera video under fire from a madman.
Open it, open it. I'm bleeding. Where you at?
Is a lucky to be alive casualty of getting shot through the armhole of his vest.
I still have scars. I have marks everywhere. So, I mean, I think about that every morning when I get ready, when I go to bed. I think about that night a lot.
Still recovering, Pelley declined to comment on the effectiveness of the protective gear provided by Douglas County to him and his colleagues that New Year's Eve night. But his boss, for the first time for this report, did.
Your deputies go to that door. They don't have the right equipment on to face that threat. Fair?
Knowing what we know now, yes, that's a fair statement.
Matthew, come out!
Sheriff Tony Spurlock told us one of his deputies had a ballistic shield, but it wasn't rated to withstand rifle rounds. And all wore soft body armor made to defend against handgun bullets only. Deputy Zach Parrish was murdered wearing that pistol-resistant ballistics vest, shot through it 6 times at close range with a high-velocity rifle.
There isn't a day that goes by that we don't think about, boy, I wish we had this knowledge today.
Using FBI files, the Fox 31 problem solvers counted another 25 law enforcement officers beyond Zach Parrish killed when bullets penetrated their vests, shot right through the armor into the chest, stomach, and back. 2 of those deaths were related to an ambush on police in Dallas. The remaining are spread all over the U.S., but all have a common theme. The vests don't technically fail. Rather, They were not rated to withstand this long list of bullets fired at police by criminals.
There are some issues around vest design.
Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pelly, Jeff's father, tells Fox 31 rifle rounds have become an all too common threat. To stop rifle rounds, deputies need to have additional, what are called level 3 or 4 hard ceramic plates inserted into or worn over the typical soft body armor. It's a $1,400 addition.
So you just go to your politicians and they just hand you all the money to do that, right?
Yeah, right. No, that's the other trouble. It's very expensive.
With that vest, with just a front plate on, you're looking at about 6 pounds worth of material.
Police ballistics protection maker Angel Armor tells Fox 31 problem solvers one of the keys to limiting armhole exposure is to custom fit armor. Another is to design and offer rifle-resistant plates to be comfortably worn all day and night over soft body armor vests for additional protection against high-velocity threats.
We want to eliminate the thought of, do I go into this traffic stop and put plates on for that extra protection? Do I go respond to a domestic call and throw plates on? Just eliminate that decision.
Zach's tragic loss, we have committed ourselves that we are going to continue to take something as tragic as it was, find a way to improve and to save lives in the future.
Both Sheriffs Spurlock and Pelly are in the process of fundraising for rifle-resistant gear, now keenly aware that buying deputies the right protective gear for all situations might cost a lot of money, but not doing so costs so much more.
1721, you are clear for end of watch.
Now, Park County Deputy Nate Kerrigan's family tells Fox 31 Nate was wearing a 10-year-old out-of-warranty and ill-fitting ballistic vest. They believe he may be alive today if the sheriff's office had provided him with the right body armor. There is a lawsuit pending which will settle that accusation. So those of you that are watching on YouTube should probably as well be almost finished with that. I just wanted to share that was a 5-part series that we did, and we took a look at the government's role in testing body armor. And we did a large number of polling throughout the state of Colorado to find out which agencies provided body armor and rifle-resistant plates to their officers and which ones didn't. What we found is a wide economic discrepancy where officers were having to buy their own gear at great expense. And of course, they might have used stuff or get it from somebody else. They were doing things to cut corners cost-wise, understandably so if your boss isn't going to buy it. So we tried to both educate the public about something they maybe hadn't thought of before, and at the same time, give it a voice in our community about a piece of investigative news that we found interesting in these patterns. So that's an example of how to use public records. I'm going to show you how to draft the best public records in a moment, but I want to wrap up this part, and I could take questions. There are a number of ways to use these records, but I always tell everybody, investigative reporters are vacuum cleaners. You ask and you gather and you suck it up and you analyze it and you see what's there. 9 out of 10 times, it's nothing. The one time it is, you dig your teeth into it and really go to town. And sometimes it requires additional records requests and a lot of sourcing and talking to people to develop your story based on this concept from public records. But it's an invaluable starting point. And in my experience, in 30 plus years running, broadcast news investigative units, that I can't think of very many blockbuster award-winning stories that changed laws and how the community saw certain things that didn't start with a good public records request. So I'm open for questions. Either, I don't know whether you can ask them on video or whether I have to use the tab, but I'll look for both ways. In the chat, oh, well, I don't know if that's a chat. So I have, I certainly have, it looks like in the chat, some of my folks that I've worked with here at American University, some students, which is awesome. I had terrific graduate students last year. I have terrific graduate students this year. I will tell you that American University, I mean, we're a yellow ribbon program. They have an office that deals with veterans. We have a long history here in DC of being associated with the military. And so, you know, I'm not the guy I teach, but they have a strong program to help everybody through that process. Anybody have any other questions, comments? Chat's coming through. Do you regularly request? Oh, I mean, that's a great question. I have filed 10,000 records requests probably. When I say, do I regularly request? Yes. Sometimes it's news specific. A train derails. Everybody covers the breaking news about the train derailing, even if nobody was killed, and it caused some traffic mess. You cover that story, and then the investigative team kind of steps in and says, well, why did it crash? What's the rail maintenance about? The braking system? Are there environmental contaminants that have hit the water? Can we test for things? How many accidents have the B&O Railroad have? How about at this particular crossing? How many times has it occurred? Are there safety records? Has it been inspected? You know, all of these things that you can sit around and think about as an investigative reporter. I start filing requests with local, with state, with federal, and then I can go to the next story and file some more requests. They don't all happen at once, but I normally get 10 to 12 stories going at the same time with requests out there and try to manage them all and follow up with them. And when one comes in and it's a story and it's hot, that's what I go focus on. But filing the request doesn't take that much time. And as those are all out there, you put enough out there and they start coming back in on a regular basis. And so, yes, I regularly file records requests. Even to like, I'll get the school employees database from the big school districts in my community every year. Put them on my computer. I want to know what everybody makes, what their name is, their title. If they're a bus driver, you know, they might have a bus crash, and then you can look at your database to see. So I'm always asking and collecting for records. Another question, trying to get a hold of data related to Americans who served as interpreters overseas on the front line, who to connect with on DOD, and do I need a lawyer? You don't need a lawyer. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, request laws, and most state laws are not written for journalists. Those laws are for public access. They're so that you, your neighbor, the lady up the street, the guy at the nursing home, the parent at the school board meeting can get records easily to see how their government operates. It is about transparency. So it doesn't need to be that complicated. I understand that's in theory. For those of you who've worked as reporters, you get blockaded all the time for records that you think you should be able to have. So I have found that the military in all of the branches have a pretty darn good system, because it is all very specifically coded about what people can have and what they can't have. It is normally, there's not that much interpretation. They'll send you, if they say no, they'll send you an exemption. You can find the exemption listed in law, and then you could say, yeah, kind of that works. If they send you an exemption that you don't think matches the law, then you have an option, of course, to go to court. I've represented myself in court a number of times, not in federal court though. I'm not sure I can, but in state court I have, certainly in local court. The question is whether the interpreters' names in which you seek can be classified in an area that is sensitive somehow from a military standpoint, or it is invasion of their personal privacy. And then they may say, no, you can't have that. And there's an exception in the law that wouldn't allow you to have it. And so you don't have to be a lawyer, but you can play a little bit of a lawyer as a reporter and do research on what those statutes say. I often actually like getting a flat out denial with a reason. I don't like getting a denial saying, sorry, we don't have the records, too bad. I hate that. But I do like it when they say, you can't have the records because of federal statute, so and so and so, or because of state law exemption ABC 1, 2, 3. Because then I can go study that and see if it applies. About half the time it doesn't apply. They're just wrong. They're trying to get out of giving you the records. Other times it absolutely applies. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to waste money going to court, because a judge, I'm no lawyer, but a judge is going to read this part and say, that's a reasonable exemption. You can't have that. But I want to encourage you on the interpreter part. Like, DOD may not be the only people who have that information. Always try to brainstorm multiple agencies that might have the same information. For example, I'm just literally, I'm sorry, I hate making things up, but I'm just going to guess here that somebody has to pay the interpreter. Maybe they put a pile of money in the finance captain's backpack and fly over there and hand it out. That happens for sure. But maybe there's a paycheck that's cut, and that it's not in the security sensitive branches that you're asking the records for. Maybe it's a simple payroll thing, right? Maybe in payroll, there's interpreter 1 overseas, interpreter 2 overseas, and you can ask for the payroll records. I mean, there might be a different division, and maybe they won't give you the names. And if they don't give you the names, take the data anyway to see what everybody makes and how many interpreters were paid in that country and for how long and when it ended, and is it continuing? Like, there's all sorts of ways to get records with different agencies. Mark says, what records have you found have been hard to get? Ever get stonewalled the runaround? Every day. Every day. I've testified in front of state law enforcement agencies and lawmakers and Senate hearings nonstop, saying when the law is written that the police may, for example, give away information on disciplined officers' files, then they never will. The law needs to say shall. You either want the law enforcement agency to give the records to be transparent to the public, or you don't. If you're giving them the option, it's a don't. And so it starts at the state capitals and in Congress, in a sense, with FOIAs. The hardest records to get are definitely from Justice Department, Homeland Security, FBI. I think FBI might be the worst. Ever since 9/11, when they came under kind of a different division, it has been just forget it. No records for anything ever. I find that the Federal Aviation Administration is really slow. They keep a lot of records, and they might be like 2 years before you get around to it. Well, when you're a journalist, I don't know if you care 2 years later, but they're really slow. They don't ever follow the guidelines and the rules. Easy form to follow. Let me show you real quick on an easy form to follow. Can I do that? I'm sorry, some of these other questions. Can you see that? How to draft a public records request?
Just see your Finder screen so far.
Okay. How about that? Can you see that now?
Not yet.
Really? Fascinating.
There it is.
Perfect. I won't take too much of your time on this, but that's a great question. And I wanted to give you some tips about drafting these. Now you could go online. There's if it's federal, especially, there's a FOIA website with all these different agencies, and there's some forms that you can fill out. But I always have my own form, especially given that most records requests go to state and local agencies per state. And so I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. All right. Bright, memorable, professional image at the top. A lot of times it's a form that you fill out on the computer, but you can attach something to it. Always attach a letter. And even if you aren't representing somebody, if your name's Al Smith, put an AS in a purple box or something at the top with your name. Something that makes it stand out from all the black and white pages that they receive. Something that just gives a little pop of color at the top. A lot of times, those fulfilling it comes in on the form, but they love it when they can print that piece of paper out and walk around and ask people if they can fulfill your records request. I always try to get all the information for who it's supposed to go to. And you don't really need this if you're submitting online, but you do for a follow-up. Because about 90% of the time, after the certain amount of time that they're supposed to come back to you, they're not going to. You have to bug them. You have to do the reporting. You have to call. You have to email. You have to check in with them. And so do this work up front so that it's easy for you. I have a stack of them in Virginia. If it's 5 days, day 6, if they haven't responded, I can pull that piece of paper and I know who to call. I've already done the research. I have this general form. I use the state under whatever the state. I use my name, the organization. Seek access to. That's a key for you to ask to seek access to instead of ask for records. When you ask for the records, sometimes they'll duplicate them for you and tell you it costs $1,000 and send you a bill, right? to avoid surprises for research costs and other costs, which is just another way to get you to back off. Ask, seek access to. Almost every state law and the federal government under FOIA allows you to see for free most records. They might complain and moan about access and having to take a marker to certain sensitive information. They may complain, but the law says that they have to give you free access to most of these records. And in fact, if it's too big a pain for the agency to do that, sometimes you can negotiate your records for free because you just want to see them. So seek access to. Then just cut and paste your specific what you want in there. Be as specific as you can. I don't love fishing expeditions. I don't like ask for 50 years worth of records on something and just see if there's a story there. I kind of want a tip or an idea or, you know, maybe enough for a trend. I'm asking for records for 5 years worth or whatever, but identify the records. And part of that is good reporting because up front, right, you've looked on the website, you've seen if there's a form for it, you've called the PIO, you've asked the questions, do you keep the records? How do you keep them? You should be able to tailor your request after that information and do exactly what you need. In this case, I'm going to ask for a mugshot of Jeffrey Dahmer. I always ask for electronic versions of the records if they're kept in such a form. Most of the time they are. And if they're not though, and they're not kept that way, they don't have to create a new record. So if they only keep paper, you're only going to get paper. If they only keep paper and you ask for electronic records, they're going to say, it's denied, we don't have electronic records. But I always ask, if they're kept in that form, I'd sure like them. They're a lot quicker. Email them to you, they send them to you in the mail. You don't have to go through the paper. And make sure you add limits, start and end dates of records that you seek, and the things that you do not need. Mostly it's dates, right? I mean, I'm going to ask for DUIs. State of Colorado, state troopers, all the DUI arrests that you have. Back to 1841. I mean, you want them to go through the archive, the historic archive with, you know, yellowed paper? No. I want to know the last 3 New Year's Eves, how many people have been arrested. So I'm going to ask for, you know, December 30th to January 2nd, 2019, 2020, 21, or whatever. I want to be as specific as I can so that they can reasonably find those records, put their fingers on them, and I don't get a bunch of stuff I don't need. If I really don't want them to know what I'm seeking, I may ask for all the DUI records in the last 3 years. That's not unreasonable. If they're kept in electronic form, I can then filter them the way I want. I always request a fee waiver as well. Media, research, or educational institute, nonprofit in the public interest. Here's a really good statute that addresses that specifically. You can look in your state and federal law. A lot of agencies say, look, we're the media and this is public interest and we're working on this and we would like an exemption or a fee waiver to whatever you charge. If they're going to charge you a nickel for 20 pieces of paper, pay the nickel. It's no big deal. If they're going to say it's $100 per hour to do research for you, to tell you, even if we have the records and it'll be 4 minimum hours, you might raise a bit of a stink, and definitely look for that fee waiver. So this is kind of what it looks like in total. Right heading, you have the your contact information is there, right? You have information of who has the record to follow up on if they don't fulfill it or get back with you right away. You have seeking access to, insert certain records, ask for electronics if you can get it, if they keep it in such a form, put limitations on it to be as specific as possible to save yourself and the agency time. I'm not looking to waste government agency time to go trolling for things. I want to find a story and I want to use taxpayer resources in a wise way, not to send them out on a goose chase. Like, I'm trying to do my job. I want you to do your job. I'm not looking to waste money or time. And so I try to create a partnership with these agencies to do that and make it clear up front that I'm I'm not trying to make them run around and do stuff that doesn't work. Real quick, I guess there's happy hour after this. I don't want to keep you from that. You wrap me up whenever you want, but I'll keep going through some of these questions. I'm glad to stay. In broadcast news, is there deadlines to complete a story? Investigative stories. Man, that's a good question. I mean, there's always deadlines in TV news, always. When you're an investigative reporter, sometimes those deadlines are extended a little bit more because they take planning. I always keep my bosses in the loop about where things stand. Hey, we filed a records, we had this idea. What do you think? Oh, I like the idea. Great. We filed some records requests. The boss knows that's going to take 5, 10, 15 days. When I get those, I kind of go through them, clean them up a little bit and say, ooh, there's a story here. Go to the boss again, news director or general manager sometimes, and say, you know the story we talked about a couple of weeks ago? I got some records. I'm telling you, this is going to be a great story. Now I need to go do the reporting part. I need to take a camera. I need to go find people to interview. I need to figure out how to do video. We need to see if these records reflect the accurate, these other records. We need to make sure we're right. But I might have something in a few days. Great. In a few days, I follow up with that again. So there's always deadlines, but investigative reporting normally, because I always have my process reviewed by a lawyer at the very last minute, that people understand that it might take a little bit more time. I try not to rush investigative stories ever. Lawsuits are a real pain. Do you reveal to the interview subject the info evidence you have prior to an interview? In general, yes. I think it's ethical to let your interview subject know what the subject is. I never, and I'm not even telling them a mistruth. I don't write my questions up. Like, I know my subject matter. I want to ask questions to an interview subject, and I want to listen to what they have to say. And then I want to do a follow-up question to try to get to the truth during that interview. In an interview, I never get an interview based on not providing the interview, the subject matter. If it's, the mayor is down on the beach in Mexico with his girlfriend, but he has a wife at home, you have the video. I would never just say, hey, mayor, let's sit down and talk about the budget, and then pull out the video of him and his girlfriend on the beach in Mexico. Not fair, not cool. And that's, it's Bush League TV. What you do is you call up the mayor and say, hey, mayor, we have a story about what happened in Mexico a couple of weeks ago. We'd like to talk to you about it. And we're going to be up front. What kind of questions? Well, you can imagine what kind of questions they are. We have some video, and we're going to come talk to you about that. Do you want to talk or don't you want to talk? So you be as upfront as you possibly can. Russell, I see you.
Hey, how's it going? Well, I'm just checking back in here. It looks like we're about time to wrap.
All right. Well, I'm just going through questions, good ones about interpreters. Yeah. About costs of nickel and diming to death on invoices. Yeah. For convenience fees. I don't mind getting nickel and dimed on public records requests. What I really hate is when somebody says, that'll be $1,250 for like an hour's worth of work and 22 documents. And I'm like, where do you come up with that? It is just a way to get you to back off. And I will do everything I can to make sure that agency complies. But I also, when they don't, and I can figure out the records a different way, I'll make sure that all of my viewers and readers know exactly how that agency behaved. And it might be a line like, the Department of Motor Vehicles said that for these 22 pages, it would cost us $12,252 in research. They really didn't want you to see what was here. We had a source hand us those same documents. We're not sure why they wanted to charge you so much, but we do see why they didn't want you to see them. So there's ways to add that into the storytelling to hold the powerful accountable in the public records game, to make sure that they know you're a reporter watching, about their transparency.
All right, well, that was wonderful, Chris. I really appreciate this. I think that I can tell from the questions that everybody's getting a lot out of this, you know, really, we can't thank you enough for bringing all your energy and bringing all this information to us, and you know, please feel free to stick around and hang out in the happy hour as well. Again, everybody, looks like we've got a lot of great feedback coming in. Chris just put his email address right there is that for, let me, is it okay if I share that with the attendees as well, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. It said, oh, yes, hosted by, yeah,
Oh, no, that's fine, that's
Halsne.edu.
fine.
Share with everybody. I love helping out, and I don't always have the answer, but I'm good at brainstorming ways around the blockades that are put up for investigative reporters. And it is simply because I've failed so often. and failing so often, you're like, I have to succeed at some point. And I'm like, oh, that worked. And I can share that kind of knowledge with folks. I'm glad to just email me. I'm glad to help you with any potential story or any questions about American University.
Well, that is a great way to learn, but hopefully with your advice we can avoid some of those failures.
That'd be great.
Now, this is really wonderful. I really appreciate you. I say that on behalf of everybody here. Thank you for joining us at MVJ. Thank you for your love of veterans and for newsroom diversity, and we look forward to hopefully having many people sign up and learn this stuff firsthand at American University.